Hello, every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a hopefully definitive answer on a question that I see come up pretty much every dang video here, which is, what exactly is the definitive Tactics Ogre experience? Which one's the best, or whatever else? And look, let me just say right off the bat, before we even get started, there's a lot of different versions of this game, and depending on how you want to count it, I mean, we're talking like 6 or 7 different flavors of it out here. And all of them are going to be for different people, but for 99% of people, for the majority of people, for the ones just getting into the series, for the ones looking to experience what makes the Ogre Battle games great, for the ones that are looking to just kind of feel out, like what made the writing good, what made the world good, what was the best overall representative experience for the series, then yes, Reborn, 110% every time in that situation. But then wait a minute, what about those arguments for the other games and the other versions and whatever else? So that's kind of what I wanted to explain here, to give some context for the folks that have no idea what's going on here. So first of all, let me just say that of the entire series, generally speaking, like the one that you're seeing here, the Let Us Cling Together, or Reborn, or whichever title you happen to be following at that time, this is the one that, by and large, has seen the most love by the developers and, well, by most folks as a whole. There's a lot of other games in the series, but generally speaking, this is the one that has seen the most love over the years. It's been remade multiple times at this point. It's the one that Matsuno, the director there, seems to really care about the most. It's not where the series started. It's basically like a midpoint and also the second to last entry into it story-wise, yet all things considered, this is the one that's kind of seen the most love there. It technically started back on the SNES and PS1, well, technically the SNES, with March of the Black Queen, which was a sort of RTS take on this whole thing here. At the same time, we saw a second Ogre Battle game coming out on the N64. Again, similar type of deal where you basically have squads of RPG characters that you sort of have control over. Like in March of the Black Queen, you used cards that you picked up from capturing cities to sort of do a sort of artillery support type of situation, to kind of keep your people, like you were basically there supporting your infantry and just giving a general overall strategy to your people to go capture a town, and then you were judged on how you handled this ongoing war effort. Okay? So basically, the idea was not so much being able to win the war, because you were going to win the war. The idea was more, how can you get out of this war with your people and your everything still intact? Because realistically, you could go to some pretty dark places with that one. And in fact, there was a joke video I made a little while ago about a Night of Lotus 2, in which, there was one of the bad endings that could happen out of that one, in which basically you were a complete monster throughout the entire thing, made an agreement with an army of demons that's just out there, to more or less hand over the world to them, unintentionally. So, when you have a game with multiple, assassination endings for your main character, you're going to have an interesting time. Anyway, point being, that game was more about the feel. It played more like a board game. It played in some very unusual ways, and overall, it was a very interesting experience, okay? I really recommend just jaunting through it at some point, not even trying to understand what the hell's going on, just to feel the absolute wackiness going on there, all right? Anyway, so from there you had its technical kind of sort of sequel with Ogre Battle 64, same general idea, except this time, instead of being a sort of artillery support role, you were more directly out there. You were a bit more zoomed in on all of the fights and things. You had a bit more dialogue going on in that one. Including some kind of awkward homoeroticism between some of the main characters. And then on top of that, you just had so many variables in that one that was absolutely incredible. To the point where you hear, like, to this day, you see forums of people discussing, like, oddly specific endings nobody's heard of. It's crazy how many different outcomes that game has, and that's really what the Ogre series is about. It's not about specific mechanics, it's not about specific locations. Every location has mechanics suited to its situation. There's a reason that throughout this entire series, almost none of the mechanics have specifically stayed the same. And I know I've made this particular video multiple times, but I feel like it bears repeating whenever there's new folks coming into the series. Like, for example, in Ogre Battle 64 there, many of the outfits play a big deal in kind of that location there. And you notice many of your command characters can't get rid of their sashes. It's not necessarily because they were limited, they wanted to limit the slots to prevent you from being overpowered. It's because those sashes were a part of their identity. So there were a lot of little things like that, where, for example, in Zenobia, the overall prophecy type thing is a much bigger deal there. So this whole thing of collecting cards and using them for magical abilities makes more sense in that particular context. In Valeria, on the flip side, you see something like, for example, the Terror Knights are something that have been around throughout the entire series, but this is the only location in which the Terror Knight actually terrifies people, because this is where those Terror Knights were basically used as a genocide. They scare people on a psychological level. So it's a lot of these little details here, little mechanical differences between all these different games that end up kind of forming their whole identity. Okay, there's no XYZ thing is best handled over here, best handled over here. No, all of the mechanics are suited to the setting and place. So in this particular vein here, this is when we get to the interesting thing that I see come up all the time of One Vision and Tactics Ogre Reborn. Actually, what I didn't touch on is actually one of my favorites, which is a Knight of Lotus, who basically handled their whole setting by developing your characters through badges that they earned through doing cool stuff in fights. And anyway, I just love that mechanic. I hope that at some point they end up bringing it back. Reborn, to me, feels like Knight of Lotus 2, just in terms of its overall balance and feel and whatever else. But anyway, so let's get into this here. Why do people say that that they prefer One Vision over Reborn? You can clearly tell it's dramatically slower and whatever else, and really this is just kind of where it comes down to features. See, for most folks that will go into the series and whatever else, the changes that Reborn brings are absolutely unquantifiable. Okay, the kinds of things that it does, the things that it improves, are far and beyond anything that they really needed to the point where it's hard to if you look at the two side by side by just features, you would assume people would go for One Vision all the time. And yet, look, I love the hell out of this mod, but I regularly find myself in a position where it just depends on where I am for me personally. If I'm at home, if I'm just sitting there, I want to go play some Reborn. I want to feel that game. I want to hear that amazing music. I want to hear those Vivaldi build-ups on the strings in the background. I want to be able to go and feel how dang fast the game is, be able to just come up with some crackpot idea for those units and put them together in 5 seconds. That speedy, vastly immersive feel and whatever else is the kinds of stuff that it adds. Does it technically smooth out some features? Kind of, sort of. There are certain things that are changed, moved, whatever else, but overall, all features are reworked in some other interesting way. There's nothing that was just simply removed just for the sake of having it removed. For example, I even just did a video recently that I guarantee people will assume the meaning will be that elemental augments and whatever else are kind of de-incentivized in that one. And the funny part is, a lot of this comes down to context. See, in the PSP version, the first remake of Let Us Cling Together here, we saw a situation where the augments played a massive deal. It was the first time that they used the augment system, in which the idea was that they took the original affinity system that was there in the SNES version, because there was a much simpler original version back on the SNES, in which somebody got a minor bonus based on their preferred weapon and on their preferred element. One rank of that augment or racial or whatever skill in the PSP version is the equivalent of the total bonus that you got in that original. And then you could equip matching gear in order to defend yourself against the element they were weak against. So that was its entire purpose, that it protected you from weaknesses. It covered your weaknesses. Overall, though, this was 4 damage. It made very little difference in the long run. Even preferred weapons barely made a difference in that one, especially considering that we're looking at a case where armor was, functionally speaking, reducing a number that was in double digits by a percentage. It was never going to be too insane in that particular instance. So overall, the mechanics of the original SNES version were limited, for lack of a better term. Now, we get into the PSP version, and that's when they went nuts with those augment-type systems, where they were basically saying, okay, look, you can take all of these things and you can stack them 8 times naturally, but then up to, like, I think it was like up to 15 times through various boosts and things like that. So you could do really crazy things with that. You could do a lot of crazy RPG-type stuff in that game. The problem was that the balancing was, as the kids say, absolutely fucked. You could, with very little effort, within the very first chapter of the game, put yourself in a position where your people were running around as gods. You could be running gear that was literally described as being given to you by the gods themselves, by just cheesing the way that things were generated in that game. You could break things, again, on total accident. I had an Iron Man run from years ago, before I fully understood what was going on with the insane amount of mechanics in these games. And in that one, it was just a simple Iron Man run, no additional grinding, no additional anything, attempting to just kind of power through the game and attempting to just kind of get an interesting story out of it. Because to me, experiencing the story world, these mechanics, just playing into it, just kind of seeing these soldiers living, dying, whatever else, seeing their stories along the way, that's what this series is to me. But in that process, I ended up winding up with a guy that was just like a beast tamer with a shield and a short bow, who was easily 3-shotting allegedly very tanky bosses on total accident, because the level curve was impossible for anyone to balance. The levels by themselves do not necessarily mean anything, but when it all comes down to it, there was no possible way for that system to be fully balanced. And this is why when we look at something like right here, like this One Vision rebalance, it basically makes levels largely irrelevant. By the time you get a few levels in, they're largely there for the purposes of getting your, your equipment upgraded a little bit, but really past the point of about 10 to 12 or so, you're at the point where you have all of your options. You can run the worst options in the game and still keep chugging on, still keep experiencing the story without breaking things on accident. You aren't going to be running into that situation where, like, it wasn't just bows that were broken. Anything could be broken in that game. Bows were just the ones that people recognized, because that was the thing that you could shoot from far away. You could break absolutely anything in the PSP version, which made it an absolute wonder horse when it came to doing challenge runs. You could challenge run that thing with frickin' anything. But still, it was a very, very odd situation where, things constantly broke by mistake. So the PSP version, yeah, fun to fiddle around with. You could get very nitty-gritty with the RPG mechanics, but overall, there was a lot. When I say a lot, I mean it was basically built to be purposely misunderstood at every possible turn. No new player ever got into that thing and didn't get confused. I mean, it was, again, it's very rare that you see a game built with so many possible misunderstandings on every single possible level. And I love that game. I absolutely love it to death, but my goodness, it does absolutely nothing to pull back that curtain. Anyway, so the One Vision mod basically came to do a sort of Long War-esque situation to that PSP version, going and rebalancing the mechanics in ways that people have been asking for out of the community, to make it more understandable for the folks that were coming into it for the first time, making it so that you don't break it on accident, and that is the purpose of this mod. It is essentially built on the hopes and dreams of the community at large. Many folks never, ever, ever assumed that there would ever be another Tactics Ogre coming. It was assumed that it was just fully dead, that the director had tried multiple times to get another one made, and it just wasn't going to happen. And so this mod was driven by an absolute ton of passion, but it is still tied to that original PSP system. So why, despite being this dream project that we all love, by the way, I apologize for the Discord thing in the background. That isn't your Discord going off. That's me forgetting to turn it off because I wanted to update the one of the codes on my Vita. Sorry. Anyway, moving on. So why is it that I still recommend Reborn for most players coming in? Look, the thing is, Reborn, again, changes a lot of things that were simply mechanically not possible in this one, and it is a lot more understandable for new players just coming in. I mean, a new player coming in isn't going to appreciate why the hell having a light one-handed katana that can shave off somebody, part of somebody's TP bar might be strategically significant. It means nothing to them. But, for example, for somebody that's been playing this game for a long time that wants to see some deeper depth in the mechanics, that they've experienced the story, they've experienced the world, that they basically can see past the PSP graphics and things like that and just see the same thing as, what Reborn is. for that person, yes, One Vision's going to be the one to go for. But when it comes to the overall, like, immersive experience, getting somebody into the world, getting somebody, like, showing somebody what those mechanics are and what they can be, that's what Reborn is for. It uses the same mechanics, it uses the same engine, it's the same stuff made faster, made just overall mechanically more improved. Like, it took a lot of redundant debuffs, like, for example, your bind, shackles, and stops, and basically just made them into one so that it's more understandable. It added skills at a time that was more appropriate. Like for example, Steadfast is something that knights get fairly early in this game, and realistically, in most cases, that will not matter very much, because they're just going to get Steadfast, and it's like, oh, that unit can't get knocked back. I'm just going to use that skill slot for something else. And look, I do that all the time, too. It is one of the best skills in the dang game, and I constantly would end up throwing it to the wayside, even on fights when I'm going into places with near death pits, right? And it does, like, it's one of these cases where I would still regularly make that mistake no matter what, because it's just, it feels like something that you shouldn't have on there. Meanwhile, on Reborn, right, you feel the lack of that skill. They constantly do this thing where you feel the lack of a certain skill coming up over and over and over and over and over, and then right in that moment where you're suddenly feeling like, man, oh man, I just got into those elemental temples and things. I wish that there was a skill, you know, to deal with all of these instant death pits. I wish that there was something that could get me out of this sticky situation. I just lost somebody to a, you know, friggin' hole. What do I do? And then suddenly it's like, oh, what's up? Steadfast. Hi. I decided to show up here at around level 30-ish. Nice to meet you. And suddenly it's like, oh, great. I understand the importance of this skill. I emotionally have made a connection to why this is here. And that is what Reborn does. It basically takes it so that sure, you can't do the RPG thing of out-leveling the game constantly. You can't break it in half mechanically. But that's the point. It doubles down on the most beautiful parts of the mechanics of the series. Like, nobody used Vigorous Attack back in the PSP version because it was simply 100% chance. But then you also could add Overpower, which was a chance to get rid of parries. But parries and deflects came in very late. So it was a case where, realistically, unless somebody was, like, going into the post-game, they didn't care about something like Overpower. They would never put Overpower because they would just reset their turn. Meanwhile, over here, we just have Vigorous Attack. They've combined both of those things into something that's automatic. You don't forget about it. You don't lose it. It's just there. It's just something for you to interact with. And then you read it, and it's like, oh, wait, there's a chance to, to go avoid those parries. Those parries were annoying, but in the process of avoiding those parries, you might suddenly realize, like, oh, crap, I can also guarantee the poison on my claws because of that 100% chance thing. It was not a thing before. I mean, it took me playing the One Vision mod for like years, and then them putting an insta-kill proc ability on a weapon to finally pick up on the fact that, oh crap, that's what this thing did. It took that level of dedication. Like, I had never heard anybody bring this up ever before, and then it was like, oh wait, holy crap, if I use Tremendous Shot with this cursed crossbow, that insta-kills. Hey Rakes, maybe you want to fix that? And I thought it was a bug with the cursed weapon, and then he's like, wait a minute, hold on, debuffs are guaranteed? So, like, it took a lot for people to figure out a lot of these deeper mechanics, and the way that Reborn is built from the top to bottom here just gives people this ability to emotionally connect and see and just experience these cooler, you know, strategic elements. That it, like, yes, it does feel unfair at times, but that's on purpose. It makes you strategize, it makes you learn, it makes you feel what a lot of us challenge runners have been, you know, talking about, Tactics Ogre being in its best form for ages. And then instead of doing anything too crazy, which granted it would be nice if those crashes didn't happen, but still, at any point, it's just like, here you go, here's the best overall experience, you know? Anyway. Also, that is just hilarious timing. But just point being, really, as far as all this stuff is concerned, it is by far, like, in terms of experiencing the strategy, in terms of experiencing the best of this game, I feel like Reborn really just nailed it from top to bottom. Yes, it did, you know, misplace a few things along the way. One Vision did the same. There was no way to fully balance the original system in a way that was absolutely perfect. Yes, we missed out on stuff like augments because, quite frankly, they would be beyond fucked powerful in this version. I mean, they do work, but they work differently. Everything still works, it just works differently. It's a long story. Anyway, like classes that nobody used before, like the Dark Priest, are absolutely wonderful this time. It's just, it's really, 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 like, when I want somebody to feel, understand, like, fully experience what it was that made this game fantastic for, you know, many of us longtime weirdos, this right here, it was made with a level of understanding that you never see in a remake, quite frankly. All right, anyway, I gotta get going. I am late to a thing. All right, thank you for watching, y'all. See you in the next one.